Asema hu hia sei. Mintimi mfa nsomo bi. Okọ no yibi film anani refi a me den na me yi ano. We eyo hini bi na ase. He gave us silver where in the beginning we had nothing. It takes one man to dream. It takes two to believe, and then it takes a multitude to move. Onyankopon baako a uyi baako ye na pem di adom nti ye frɛ no basa yi adom Nyankopon. Onyankopon osoro fonton from koma kokoroko a wogi bram na brempon gi brimu ase onna ase ni. Powerhouse Ministry International. Yesi yenhia wo a agenkwa semenhia anke ye fahinie ne anke ye nam yi esi entrase. Nanso wapeja yani e de hwe daachim kwaje. Obaako mienu enne hwakra a wode abegu yensem aye yen dom. Obroni kan ye esi wahini anka obefra no kingdom. Ora Kristo Yesu. Yedawase. Yedawase a ekosi sen wo yo kwantuni poma. Wo yo kofuo poma. Wo yo obi a oso niema akoton so poma. Onyankopon yesusu basafanso a wo ye poma. The potter's staff, the fighter's rod, the shepherd's staff to protect and direct. And so already we have 20 and 5. New beginnings, greater heights. This is how far we have come. Do not be in a hurry to move. There's so much more we have to tell you.
Powerhouse Ministry International, PMI, is 25 years old.
Hooray!
Hip, hip, hip.
Hooray!
Hip, hip, hip.
Hooray!
Welcome. What a beautiful year. A moment to celebrate God in the highest.
What a time to tell the story of PMI, which I believe will bless you.
A story as told by eyewitnesses, torchbearers, and the visionary.
A story of God's church through little beginnings, interesting details, but all coming together to form a beautiful story.
So now, what do you think about this amazing story?
Jojo, I believe our viewers should relax and
Watch this.
Once again, welcome to a simple yet an amazing story of God's grace, mercies, and goodness. A story of despising not little beginnings, a story of series of disappointments, enduring hardships, long sufferings, betrayals, and yet winning battles. A story of hope against hope. A story of interesting detours that still reveal the light of God, shining at all difficult moments. A story of the reality of God's defining moments that testifies of His abundant grace, mercies, and His goodness. This is a story of what to do when you don't know what to do, even as a believer. It is our prayer that this story of Powerhouse Ministries International at 25 will build your faith in the Lord so that you will never give up nor throw in the towel in your walk with the Lord. So to tell the story of Powerhouse Ministries International, PMI, God touched the heart of a well-read young man, a passionate servant of God, right here in Ghana, with a strong conviction, passion, and desire to step out and start a church. Reverend Bernard Ni Ashantekwe Adeakwa.
In 1995, somewhere around June, I felt led of the Lord after intense prayer to step out and start a commission. I was not too sure exactly where, but the initial place of meeting was at the medical school canteen in Kolebu. Prior to that, in June of that same year, 1995, I had spent quite a number of days and nights praying for weeks at the University of Ghana campus, Legon, seeking the face of the Lord on exactly what to do. And I, with my wife, after intense prayer, decided to settle on starting a church. And then Mansa was pregnant with Timothy. Our firstborn son was 4 years old. Our second-born daughter was 2 years old, and Timothy was being carried in the womb. It was going to be quite a trying time stepping out and starting a church with my wife pregnant with child. But she gave me her support, and we stepped out with a lot of prayer and fasting. And I'm sure she can tell us how she felt when I told her PMI was about to start.
It was interesting. The day he told me that he had the conviction to start a church, I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. But because of how we have built our lives over the years, trusting God, following God's direction in every way, I just said, follow your heart. If God has called you to start a church, I'm with you. I'll stand with you. And we prayed about it, and we sought the face of the Lord, and that is how it all began. It was difficult, but that is how it all started. Pregnant with Timothy at the time, didn't know what to do. And that time, you had to go to the gardens to pray, and it was lonely because there was nobody there. It was so lonely, and you were out praying, looking for a place. You know, the burden was so heavy at the time. And I didn't have friends because that time, most of our friends were nowhere to be found because we're starting a church. They were not there. You couldn't call anybody. You couldn't look for anyone. And with my pregnancy and the little kids, you know, we just had to trust God and look up to God. And it was full of lonely moments. Very lonely moments, and I think that was how I felt at the time.
So I mean, it's interesting to now look back and see the loneliness, the rejection, and the fear of the unknown. And two young couples, I was in my early 30s, and you were still in your late 20s, wanting to step out and start a church without a job, without an income, and believing God for the future. But that is how Powerhouse started. And so I reached out to a few friends who initially were not very keen on joining us. And then we remembered Reverend Oscar, who had been a childhood friend we had grown up with in Nyaniba. And so we called him over and mentioned to him that we were ready to start a church. And he willingly jumped into the fray with us. And that is how Powerhouse started.
How really prepared was the family of Reverend Bernard Adiakwa and his beloved wife at this time?
We were living in an outhouse belonging to a friend at North Kaneshi, and we had 3 children. There was no car, and we couldn't pay rent. Life wasn't very easy, but we had faith in God that He who has begun a good work in us and called us will definitely provide.
So the PMI journey began with great hope, focus, and undying faith, but with more battles to fight as regards place of worship and accompanying challenges.
The lonely moments of prayer alone at Legon was because there was nobody. So even though I stepped out in June, the whole of June was just for prayer and fasting, all nights, sometimes painful all nights at Legon. And then on the first Sunday of July, we decided to gather, and that is where we came to the Kolibu Medical School canteen, which had allowed us on a temporal base to meet there.
So when Pastor Bernard shared with me about
when
the
Bernard,
conviction,
your husband,
he, I was quiet for a few moments because the burden just came on me like, you're going to start a church. It means that you are going to be, you know, in the public eye. Everybody's going to be looking at you. I had to behave myself in a particular way You have to be, a pastor's, senior pastor's wife. No training. Nobody to be an example for me. And it was, so many things just came rushing through my mind. But I just said to myself, if God has called, then God is definitely going to equip us to go through it. And I just said, Father, show me what to do. And all I just wanted to do was support him any way I could. So it was more of like, what can I do? What can make you feel better? You could tell that he was so burdened with the call, so heavy. It was like someone, I was pregnant, but he was spiritually pregnant, and I just didn't want to burden him with anything. I was pregnant, but I wanted him to support me emotionally, but he was also pregnant spiritually. So both of us had to find a way to manage it. Otherwise, because anything can trigger, anger, conflict, but it was something that he wasn't too sure of. He was now praying about it. And so I just had to just be calm and just seek God's face and just trust God through the moments. And the interesting part was that God sent helpers. There was Claudia Chakbonu who came along. She was somebody who helped me through, because I kept asking God, if we start a church, what do I do? Who's going to help me? But she came around when Reverend Chakbonu came to the house a few times during the time we're praying and seeking God's face. And she said, look, I want to come to you, and every Friday would have an all night. So I'll come and sleep over Friday around 12. I'll wake you up and then would pray. So that strengthened me, that kept me going. And this was after we had Timothy, because that time I was still pregnant. We had Timothy on the 22nd of June. Then I was discharged the next day. After a week, I was in church, but I had to be in church because I wanted to show that I was there. And there was nobody to take the kids' church, so I had to be there to be in the children's service, help with the rhymes and Bible stories and all. And it was so much, but every day I kept telling God, give me wisdom, give me strength. Give me wisdom, give me strength. And that took us through, that period for some time.
By the grace of God, young as Powerhouse Ministries International PMI was, God again touched other lives to join this moving train with so much passion and spiritual energy. Let's welcome one of the founding members.
I would say that the PMI story cannot be told without mentioning the initial opposition. There were many things that were said. There were many friendships lost in the process, and some of us were personally targeted. But to God be the glory, because He indeed is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. He doesn't reward based on an affiliation with the church. He doesn't reward based on affiliation with the pastor. He rewards based on your personal commitment to His work. And so we thank God that He has been faithful all these years.
But one of the reasons why I was heavily burdened was also because of the feeling of inadequacy of being able to be a senior pastor. And again, stepping into a ministry where now you are going to be the leader and be the example and have nobody to look up to, and setting new standards by yourself. I looked at my own human feelings and doubted whether I could ever be a senior pastor providing leadership for people, and now learning to watch my life and behave myself well. So those are some of the anxious moments, and I know that it can derail a lot of people. And so the way out was to pray a lot. And so the ministry started with intense prayer, and that is why we keep talking about beyond our inadequacies, beyond our limitations, beyond our human weaknesses, because you learn how to draw strength beyond yourself. One of the things she has not mentioned is, because she was pregnant with Timothy and she delivered around 22nd, and because we had moved out to start a new commission, we didn't have any members. And so at the outdooring of Timothy a week after, virtually nobody was at our outdooring. And so the outdooring was performed by me, myself, with my wife, with nobody, no offering, nothing, nothing. And that's how Timothy was born, because the name Timothy means favored by God. It was more like a prophetic declaration that in the midst of what you are going through, there's still grace upon you. So Timothy was born in an environment of reproach, rejection, neglect. And after the outdooring, a week after, we were in church.
Yeah.
Because if was born on 22nd, outdoor on the week after, the Saturday. Then the Sunday, which was the 2nd of July, PMI was starting.
Such a thought-provoking and yet inspiring story that has yet begun. How did PMI survive the storms and go through all the levels of disappointment? The story unfolds.
How do you even explain to anybody you are starting a church? Everybody is hearing stories. And so the first meeting was a meeting of confusion. People who came, a few people who came were coming to see what it was like, whether what they had heard was true. It wasn't a church service of a gathering of people. And in that confusion, like Jesus Christ in the manger, Powerhouse was born. The location of the church proved a major problem because it was a temporal place in a hospital. And we were constantly being ejected every week. We couldn't tell whether the meeting was going to come on or not. And sometimes we'll go there and the doors are closed and we have to sneak in through a window, a broken pane, and enter into the place and unlock the door behind the caretaker and then arrange chairs, which we had to bring all the way from Latebiokoshi, because someone like Pastor David and a few people will carry chairs all the way from Latebiokoshi around Ajivon and push it on a truck and bring it to Kolebu. There was nowhere else we could keep our things apart from my uncle's house at Latebiokoshi. So that is how the church started. Because of our background of being members of a fellowship, Laboni Cantonment Christian Fellowship, the first church attendance was with them. About 30 or 40 of them came over to help us.
As the story unfolds, another key eyewitness to the early days of PMI, Reverend Emmanuel Kwabena Ansa, recounts briefly the passion that drives Reverend Bernard Adiakwa and his love for God and the church.
I used to be the president of Laboni Cantonment Christian Fellowship. Reverend Bernard came to join us at the Laboni Cantonment Christian Fellowship. He came out as a brother who was very, very zealous, who, especially for souls. He was also one of our worship and praise leaders, and he really brought a lot of energy to the fellowship.
And so our first meeting was a bit organized, and that is how the church started. And of course, Reverend Oscar was there, and Sandra and her family, who had also heard then that we're starting a church, and my dad had also come to join us for our very first meeting. And so in that environment of a lot of trepidation, anxiety, not knowing what the future lay, we embarked on a fasting from the day one. And because we had no place to meet, the next meeting place was at the Indatfa Park. So sometimes you start at the Indatfa Park praying and it's rain, and you still have to hold hands through the rain and pray. And some of our first members were Pastor David, a few of the Collegono boys who didn't go to church and were not believers, but had heard that Pastor Bernard had started a church, will come with me to pray. But we stood there and we prayed and we fasted every single day. After 6 months of meeting in the canteen, we were rudely ejected suddenly, and we had no place. One Sunday morning, the place was locked up, and we had to just wander. And finally met later in the day at the social welfare, which was another canteen. And the gentleman was afraid, so he let us just meet in the corridor, open space with the sun beating on us, just packed a few chairs just to be able to have a meeting with a few young people who were there. And then we had to eventually look for a place. We looked all over Accra. Nobody was prepared to host us. And then Friday before the Sunday, we heard news about a school at the KG1 cluster of schools that was prepared to allow us to meet for that Sunday. So we now had to pass word around. There was no mobile phone, there was no WhatsApp, there was no communication, whatever it is. So what do? You kind of like have to pass word around and hope it gets around. So our first meeting was a major disaster because the place was open on a Sunday morning, very dirty. You had to come early and come and sweep yourself. Nobody there. The people don't know where we're going to meet, so most people don't come. And we just sat there, but in the midst of it, the faithful God proved through. We still held on to our faith, and we continued praying. And that's how the meetings started at the KG1 cluster of schools, which was a paradise.
Acts chapter 1 verse 8. You shall receive power after the Holy Ghost is come upon you, and you shall be witnesses unto me all over the world. This foundational scripture spoke and reinforced the faith of the Powerhouse Ministries International family.